let's move on to my pick then. Right after your A+ Kalen DeBoer pick, and this was a guy that I think people were so shocked that he slid this far, but Sonny Dykes, because if you remember, he was coming off, a runner up in the national championship game. And we talked about it. It's like, yeah, he's gonna slip this far because I mean, you're looking at the talent that he's losing, and like I don't know if he's replacing it with the same kind of talent. Like I don't know that he ever will be recruiting at the level that some of these other guys are recruiting at. So, um, yeah, they finished 5-7, 41st in offensive points per game, 79th in defensive points per game allowed. They're recruiting. They only finished 34th. They did well in the transfer portal though. So this is an interesting one. I think Sonny Dykes is a really good coach, but eh, I think in both instances, last year and this year, we might be affected more by recency bias than maybe we probably should be. Like I would draft him lower than I drafted him this past year. Now this could look different in the new Big 12. However, there are other Big 12 coaches that I think that I would take over Sonny Dykes based on what I project for the future of those programs. That's not to say TCU won't be a good program these next couple of years. They could end up winning the Big 12, 3 of the next 4 years. Um, but I still wouldn't take him over these other guys. Just so that's just what it is. I think like at the time it was a pretty decent pick. Like I think there was some value to be saw in there, to be seen there because of he was coming off that run-up national championship. But yeah, I mean, only a couple schools in history have ever made it to a national championship and then failed to make a bowl game the next year. And this is one of those teams. So pretty bonkers, if you ask me.
Yeah, I think this is one of those. I'll get similar to Lincoln Riley, where I'm way more comfortable. If you ask me now, that buying stock in Sonny Dykes when it's a little bit lower today than it was just 12 months ago, coming off that national title game appearance. You mentioned all the change that went through. That's totally fine. He made some coaching hires too. Kendall Briles replacing Garrett Riley didn't quite work out. Maybe in year two it does. You have Joe Gillespie at DC. You bring in Andy Avalos, who I think is a really good hire for you at
Yeah.
DC. You may remember him from Boise State. Before that, he was at Oregon, the DC there, and Boise State as well as defensive coordinator. So he's had very good success um, getting the most out of their defenses. So I think that's a really nice pairing with Sonny Dykes there. TCU is a program that's had some success, even in the Big 12. You remember the Gary Patterson days with Javon Boykin. I mean, they were right there for in the college football playoffs. Boom, right there. And then, they didn't play the Big 12 championship game because they didn't have a championship game. And they got bumped down for obviously that very, very good Ohio State
Which
team.
is still wild, but yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy there. So they've been very close to making the playoffs a couple times, but also winning the title. Obviously, I wouldn't say close a couple years ago. I mean, they obviously got blown out, but they were a game away. So who knows there? I like what they did in the portal. I mean, you think Josh Hoover's the guy. James Brockmeyer's a really nice spring ad for you on the O line. He had a beautiful spring for Alabama. It's just not going to get playing time there because they're bringing in Parker Brailsford. So he's coming over. You bring in Eric McAllister, who's following Andy Avalos
Yeah.
from Boise State. There's some nice pieces here. And I do think with part of the reason why I'm more comfortable buying Sonny Dykes now than I was 12 months ago is one, the value's lower, but two, you're in the Big 12 where there is a ton of open gaps for you to make that playoffs. I mean, it would not surprise me if TCU won the Big 12 this year. It just wouldn't. I'm not going to pick them to, no, but it just wouldn't surprise me with how open and how similarly talented all these teams are. And I do think with their pedigree, what they've had, um, with their success recently, but also historically as well, that would not surprise me for them to be a team that consistently recruits in the top three of the Big 12. I mean, they were 24th a couple years ago. Last year was not great. I mean, or this past year was not great. Um, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, so would I draft him this high again? Probably not, but that could also mean that if we were to do this again, that he might have some value, later down the board, projecting for the future. Because I think he'll be at TCU for what feels like the long term, even though they had a rough season this past year.
Yeah, no, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And also yeah, I think it's pretty impressive what he did in year one. And to sustain that, like we said, was tough. Part of the reason why he fell down. But yeah, at the sixth pick, is it a little rich in hindsight? Maybe, but also like, yeah, I would say maybe. I mean, you look at him and Joey Maguire, right? Two guys that had disappointing seasons, right? And they're both on your team, and we'll talk about him in a second. But you still taking Sonny Dykes over Joey Maguire? And I know you're a huge Joey Maguire fan, and so am I. So am I. But are you still doing that?
It would be a huge debate, and I like my gut feeling tells me to take Joey Maguire, but it, the right play is probably to still take Sonny Dykes over Joey Maguire. Probably. Just because of you've seen the success and you also see the success in the transfer portal as well. Now, Joey Maguire's done his work in the transfer portal as well, but it's the recruiting trail is where Joey Maguire's kind of got him right now, which is pretty nuts. And for West Texas, like in Lubbock, the fact that he's recruiting at the level that he is pretty bonkers right now.
Well, it's also like long-term sustainability is it's a big deal, right? So like we'll talk about it once we do our coaching staff, our second year coaches this year with Deion Sanders. Like the high school recruiting, it matters, right? For long-term sustainability and building a program and the foundation of it. Can you do it with transfer portals? Mel Tucker tried and it fizzed out. Deion Sanders trying right now and it didn't work. It's what to be determined, right? But I still think, yeah, that matters. The core of your roster has to be from the high school ranks. And McGuire understands that. And I think Dykes does too. I think they're just slowly working on it.